next presenter. And this is the thing about PechaKucha is sometimes you're not quite sure what's going to follow what. But let's give Lauren J. Zito a very warm welcome for her presentation. My best camera was my worst. Lauren.
I guess we're ready. I spent 25 years in Pittsburgh, and I want to talk about wandering through Pittsburgh during the COVID-19 pandemic. And yes, a lot of people dyed their hair pink in the pandemic, and I was definitely one of them. So I started exploring the quiet streets of Pittsburgh. I don't know if anyone's been to Pittsburgh, but yes, oh, thank you. It's very hilly, lots of stairs, many stairs. Stairs, and I'm not going to be as quick as possible on this one, stairs were the main source of transportation for the lower and middle class, from their houses on the hill to the factories below. So I wandered these streets, and I had a very broken phone, and it was the pandemic at that time, and it was, well, I would say the summer of 2020 into 2021, very cheap phone, but I loved it because it was cracked on the front, cracked on the back, the pressure was off, and I was wandering these streets, and on a side note, I was on a very long distance relationship with my partner, and we would often go on these tandem walks. He would go on his and I would go on mine, and we would walk in tandem and share images and texts of what we saw. And so this was done with my very cheap, sorry, Samsung phone that was broken half the time. And I was pulled in by color and light and the decay of Pittsburgh, and also a lot of us were working from home during that time. So the times I had time to walk was in the late afternoon and early evening, and the light was so low. And the interesting thing about Pittsburgh is that things didn't necessarily get torn down, and things had a decay to them. So I was pulled in by different shapes and colors. I had this phone that was really awful, but I was able to put color together and juxtapose color and shapes and form, and changing up my point of view. Pittsburgh is green. Pittsburgh is very green if you've never been there. And the thing with Pittsburgh is that there's all these neighborhoods. Things get well, don't always get torn down, but they go through this decay, and the green overtakes it. Some things are around, are left for a very long time, days, months, years. Some things are hidden, and especially walking during the pandemic time was my time to kind of think and look and start looking, and there was secret worlds behind things. Some things were definitely abandoned, some things were not, but through my walking, and I had particular routes that I would go, but I would spend, through walking, I was able to see a lot of weird, very quirky neighborhoods. If you've never been to Pittsburgh, you've got to go to Pittsburgh. And just because something was closed off didn't mean there wasn't any activity in them, which was really interesting. So I was, and not a lot of people during this time. People were closed up, either working or, especially in the city. So I had the city to myself, which was really sort of spectacular. So I would spend time looking at things out of context, pulling color, getting close up on objects as much as my poor little phone would let me. And that's actually a spring that was a natural spring in the side in one of these neighborhoods, and people would drink from them. Pittsburgh, even if something gets torn down, we still feel the shadow of it. And that's the lovely thing about Pittsburgh, is that you can still sort of see it, still sort of see things. Things don't get raised and, like a Dunkin' Donuts gets put there. It just sort of exists. And I found with this camera is I was very loose with it. It didn't have a lot of settings, and it kind of was what it was. And I found that some of my best shots were ones I called shooting from the hip. I couldn't tell what I was shooting, and I was just sort of feeling it. One downside of Pittsburgh is that Pittsburgh was and still is a walking city, but cars came, and many of the neighborhoods got violently but beautifully divided for highways and cars. So you get these kind of no man's zone. I mentioned before about how Pittsburgh has kind of a secret world. You'll have these neighborhoods where these buildings, and is it empty? Is it not empty? I'm not sure. Sometimes I've seen these doors open and there's a hub of activity, but it's secret and there's no signs. But yet sometimes there are signs. One thing I found was lovely with Pittsburgh is that because things don't get really thrown out, you kind of can look back in time and you can see different times and things got changed and reworked and reused for different things. Sometimes you knew what they were for, sometimes it sort of made sense, and sometimes it didn't make sense. But there was this definite urban decay, sort of walking through Pittsburgh, spending some time really looking and walking, not driving through various places, but walking and pausing, kind of walk through. I haven't been to Pittsburgh in some time, but one thing I really miss about Pittsburgh is what is over that next hill, or what is behind this building? Is it abandoned? Is it not abandoned? It's sort of mysterious. What was it used for 5 different times over? But for me, it's walking through Pittsburgh, having this camera that kind of didn't work, which I still have, and it's all smashed up and it kind of doesn't work. But I was able to, it was perfect for this pandemic, perfect for me, and it's and I'm ready to go with no matter what I got in my pocket.